Yep, I don't think we're having another anytime soon.
The room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn to keep the outside world from interfering with their evening. The bed was slightly unmade, sheets tangled and soft pillows scattered across it. Angel sat on the edge of the mattress, her legs curled beneath her, and her hands clutching Cairo's phone. She was crying, small sobs shaking her frame, and her long hair partially covered her face. The light from the screen reflected in her eyes, making them glisten even more as she wiped at her tears. Cairo stood by the doorway, his usual composure faltering in a way that no one outside his world had ever seen. He had always been the epitome of control, feared by many, respected by all, and never one to show vulnerability. Yet now, in his own bedroom, watching his wife cry over something on his phone, every muscle in his body tensed. His fists clenched involuntarily. His jaw tightened. He took a cautious step forward, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. She had seen something. He was sure of it. Something terrible. Something that could ruin everything he had built, everything he had worked for, everything he had fought to protect. His thoughts spiraled as he tried to anticipate what it could be. A message from a rival? A secret transaction exposed? A betrayal? The possibilities made him swallow hard. His fingers twitched as he reached for the phone, trying to understand what had triggered this sudden wave of emotion from Angel. Cairo. She whispered through her tears, barely audible. Her voice trembled with sadness, yet it carried a strange warmth that made his chest tighten. He froze. She said his name. Was she accusing him? Was she about to demand an explanation for something he did not yet understand? Cairo, did you know? She murmured, her lips quivering. He stepped closer, heart racing. His mind was preparing for confrontation, for rage, for apology, for explanation. But the moment he saw her face fully, the tension in the room thickened. She looked so small, so fragile, and yet there was a fire in her eyes that no one had ever dared to challenge. Angel, he said cautiously, his voice low, steady, trying to maintain control over the storm inside him. What? What is it? What have you seen? She shook her head, shoulders trembling. Her hands gripped the phone tighter, pressing it against her chest. I just... She sniffled, letting out another sob. It is so sad. I cannot believe this happened. Cairo blinked. He took another step, confusion mixing with relief and lingering tension. What is sad? Tell me. Now. His voice carried a quiet edge of authority, but it was tempered by fear. Fear that whatever had caused her tears might be something beyond his control. Angel looked up at him, her eyes still glossy with tears, and smiled faintly through her crying. It is just a movie, she whispered. I was watching this movie on your phone, and it made me cry. That is all. Cairo froze. His eyes widened. The tension in his body melted into disbelief. His chest heaved as he struggled to process the fact that the source of this emotional storm was nothing more than a fictional story on a screen. He exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. He felt like a fool. He had spent precious minutes imagining betrayals, threats, and the ruin of everything he had built, only to discover that his wife had been crying over a romantic drama. Angel watched him carefully, a playful glint returning to her tear-filled eyes. You look ridiculous, she said softly. You were so serious. I thought you were going to interrogate me or something. Cairo's jaw tightened. He wanted to be angry, to scold her for making him panic, but the sight of her sitting there, vulnerable and smiling through her tears, made that impossible. Instead, he simply muttered, I am your husband. It is my job to know when something is wrong. I cannot see you crying like this without. His voice faltered, and he stopped. He did not know how to finish the sentence. He had no words that could convey how powerless he felt in this moment. Angel reached out and touched his arm lightly. You do not need to worry. I am fine. Truly, she said, her voice gentle but teasing. You look so serious. It is funny to see you panic over a movie. Cairo could not help but let out a small, almost embarrassed chuckle. It was a sound he rarely made, reserved only for moments when he felt a strange combination of relief and exasperation. He stepped closer, taking the phone from her hands and placing it gently on the bedside table. "Next time," he said quietly, "tell me before you start crying over a movie. You do not need to scare me half to death." Angel laughed softly, the sound light and melodic. She reached out to him, tugging at the sleeve of his suit as if pulling him closer. "You are ridiculous, Cairo. You care too much. And you look completely helpless when you think something is wrong." He did not answer immediately. Instead, he stood there, looking at her, feeling a strange mixture of frustration, love, and amusement. He had spent years building a reputation that made others tremble in fear. He had been a man who could control situations with a word, a gesture, or even a glance. Yet here, in his own bedroom, his most formidable enemy was not an outsider. It was the simple vulnerability of the woman he loved. Her moods, her laughter, her tears, these were forces that could undo him faster than any gun or threat ever could. Angel leaned back against the pillows, curling her legs beneath her once more. "You are lucky I am not actually mad," she said. "If I were, you would be running around doing whatever I say right now." Cairo's eyes narrowed slightly. "Whatever you say. Are you threatening me, Angel?" he asked, though his tone carried a hint of amusement rather than fear. Angel laughed, a full, rich laugh that made him feel strangely lightheaded despite the panic he had just experienced. "Yes," she said simply. "I am threatening you. And you will obey. No excuses." He looked at her, exasperation clear in his posture, and muttered under his breath, "I am a mafia boss. I can face armies, betrayals, and assassins. And yet, I cannot face a pregnant woman who cries over a movie." Angel raised an eyebrow. "Pregnant? Did you forget that little detail?" she asked, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "You will obey me not just because I am crying, but because I am creating your child." Cairo froze. That small reminder, so simple and yet so powerful, made the air in the room feel heavier. He had not even realized how deeply the pregnancy had changed their dynamic. He was still the mafia boss in the world outside, feared and untouchable. But here, in this quiet bedroom, he was a servant to her whims, completely at her mercy. Angel smiled faintly, her hand reaching out to touch his chest lightly. "You will do everything I ask," she said softly, almost whispering, "and you will do it willingly." Cairo swallowed hard. He wanted to argue, to resist, to maintain some shred of his authority. But he could not. He saw the truth in her eyes, the playful determination, and he knew that she was right. He would do whatever she wanted, because he loved her, because he would protect her, because he could not imagine life without her. "Very well," he said finally, his voice low and steady, though tinged with reluctant humor. "I will obey. But do not think this means I am not still a formidable force outside this room." Angel laughed, a soft, teasing sound that made him feel both frustrated and enchanted. "You are formidable. But here, Cairo, you are mine. Completely." For the first time in what felt like years, Cairo allowed himself to relax slightly. He took a step closer, standing by the edge of the bed, and watched her carefully. She was radiant, even with tears in her eyes. She was alive, vibrant, mischievous, and completely in control of him in ways no one else could ever hope to be. The evening continued with quiet conversation, laughter, and the subtle tension of their new dynamic. Cairo remained by her side, ever vigilant, yet slowly learning that his strength in the outside world mattered less here. Here, in the dimly lit bedroom with Angel laughing softly and wiping her tears away, he was powerless. And somehow, that powerlessness felt right. By the time the night drew on and the room grew darker, Angel was finally calm, resting against her pillows with a small, satisfied smile. Cairo stood nearby, watching over her like a guardian. He was still the mafia boss. He was still feared by many. But here, in this room, he was nothing more than a man in love, utterly devoted, and completely at the mercy of the woman who held his heart. And in that quiet, domestic chaos, a new chapter of their life had begun, one filled with laughter, unexpected tears, and the subtle but undeniable power of love. The night had settled into a quiet rhythm, the city lights outside the bedroom window casting a soft glow across the room. The sheets still carried the warmth of their earlier laughter and tension, the scent of Angel's perfume lingering faintly in the air. Cairo, though physically present in the room, felt an entirely different weight on his shoulders now. He had survived the movie incident, yet he knew that this was only the beginning. Angel, with her playful energy and unpredictable moods, had made one thing perfectly clear. His life as a mafia boss meant nothing when it came to the whims of his pregnant wife. Angel, still perched on the bed, looked at him with a mischievous glint in her eyes. She stretched her arms lazily, yawned dramatically, and then leaned back onto the pillows with a sigh that somehow managed to convey both satisfaction and looming trouble. "You know, Cairo," she began, her voice light but deliberate, "I think we need to discuss the matter of my midnight cravings." Cairo froze. His muscles tensed instantly, like a predator anticipating danger. Midnight cravings were a phenomenon he had been warned about in vague terms, but he had yet to experience them firsthand. Now, sitting there in the quiet of their bedroom, he felt the full gravity of the situation. His mind immediately began calculating the possibilities. Chocolate ice cream? Pickles? Peanut butter? Some strange combination he could not even imagine. "You do not need to panic," Angel continued, noticing his stiff posture. Her smile was both teasing and terrifying in its certainty. "I am not asking you to panic. I am simply informing you of my needs. That is all." Cairo's jaw tightened, his mind already racing. "Informing me of your needs. Does that mean I am expected to deliver immediately?" He felt a cold sweat forming at the back of his neck. He had handled dangerous negotiations, violent confrontations, and treacherous alliances. He had made men tremble at the sound of his name. And yet, the thought of responding to Angel's whims at this hour made him feel entirely powerless. "I will do whatever is necessary," he said, his voice low, but the edge of resignation was unmistakable. "Tell me what you require." Angel clapped her hands lightly, as if celebrating some private victory. "Good," she said, her tone playful yet commanding. "Tonight, I require ice cream with pickles. And, yes, some chocolate syrup. And possibly a few slices of cheese. Oh, and a cup of hot tea. Preferably honey-flavored." Cairo blinked, his expression frozen. He wanted to argue, to protest, to insist that this was unreasonable, but the determined look in her eyes silenced him. He nodded slowly. "Very well. Ice cream with pickles, chocolate syrup, cheese, and honey tea. Consider it done." Angel's grin widened. "Excellent. And hurry. The craving. It is urgent." By the time Cairo reached the kitchen, the quiet apartment was empty and still, yet he felt as though the walls were closing in on him. The refrigerator door creaked as he opened it, and he stared at the shelves, trying to assemble the bizarre combination she had requested. Ice cream next to pickles? He hesitated. Chocolate syrup over pickles? He frowned. And the cheese? He could not imagine where that would fit. Yet he pressed on. He had never been more determined to survive a domestic mission. Minutes later, Cairo returned to the bedroom, carefully balancing a tray with all of Angel's requested items. He placed it on the bed beside her, hands shaking slightly, though his expression remained as stoic as ever. Angel's eyes lit up. "Perfect," she said, her voice soft yet commanding. She leaned forward to take a bite of the ice cream, her nose wrinkling slightly at the taste of pickles mixed with chocolate syrup. Not bad. Actually, it is delicious." Cairo's eyes widened slightly. "She said it is delicious?" He thought, stunned. He had expected mockery, disgust, perhaps even laughter, but not praise. His chest tightened as he realized that in her eyes, even his fumbling attempts at satisfying her whims were worthy of approval. The night continued with similar chaos. Angel demanded that he fetch various items from different parts of the apartment. A blanket, a pillow, her favorite mug, and sometimes even simple things like adjusting the thermostat. Each request, no matter how small, made Cairo move with precision, yet the sheer volume and unpredictability of her whims left him exhausted in ways no battle ever had. She was relentless. At one point, she asked him to taste test a combination of peanut butter, noodles, and pickles. Cairo's expression betrayed nothing, but inside, his mind screamed. Peanut butter with noodles. And pickles? He carefully sampled a small bite, forcing a neutral expression. Angel watched him intently, smirking as if enjoying his struggle. "You are trying too hard to hide your disgust," she said. "It is okay to admit you do not like it. But know this," she added, leaning closer, "you will eat it if I ask you again. It is part of your duties as my devoted husband and protector of my cravings." Cairo swallowed carefully, his throat tight. He nodded, his resolve firm. "I will do anything for her," he thought. Anything. He realized that this was not just about a craving or a moment of domestic chaos. This was about demonstrating devotion, love, and the ability to endure her unpredictable moods. And somehow, he found himself smiling slightly at the absurdity of it all. Angel, noticing the faint smile, reached out to tug gently at his sleeve. "See, you are beginning to understand. You are not just a mafia boss anymore. You are my servant. And soon, you will learn that your life revolves around my needs, my comfort, and the baby growing inside me." Cairo's chest tightened at the reminder. He had known about her pregnancy for months, yet he had never fully grasped how drastically it would change his life. He had imagined the baby as a small extension of their bond, but he had not anticipated the complete upheaval of his daily routine, his sense of control, or his own dignity. And yet, standing there, watching Angel laugh softly and take another bite of her bizarre midnight snack, he knew that nothing in the world mattered more than her happiness. The night stretched on, filled with small errands, awkward cooking attempts, and endless demands. Cairo found himself carrying bowls of ice cream to the balcony, adjusting pillows, fetching water, and even attempting to make a simple cup of tea, only to burn it slightly and receive a mock glare from Angel. Each moment was a test, a lesson, and a confirmation of how completely his life had changed. By the time the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains, Cairo was exhausted, his body aching in ways that no physical fight ever had. He sat on the edge of the bed, watching Angel stretch lazily and yawn dramatically, her eyes sparkling with mischief and satisfaction. "You survived your first night," she said, her voice teasing but warm. "Not bad, Cairo. Not bad at all. But know this. The nights ahead will be far more challenging." Cairo looked at her, his expression weary but resolute. "I am ready," he said quietly, though every muscle in his body protested. "Whatever you need, I will do. I will endure anything for you. And for our child." Angel smiled faintly, leaning against him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Good," she said. "You will need that determination. Because my cravings, my moods, and my needs, they will test you. And I expect you to survive every challenge." Cairo closed his eyes briefly, letting the weight of the night settle over him. He was a mafia boss, feared by many, yet here, in this quiet bedroom, he was nothing more than a man in love. Helpless, devoted, and completely at the mercy of the woman who held his heart. And in that moment, as the first rays of sunlight crept through the window and the world outside began to stir, he realized that his life had changed forever. The battles outside, the power, the fear he commanded, they were nothing compared to the chaos, the love, and the unpredictability of a pregnant angel demanding midnight snacks, bizarre combinations, and his unwavering attention. He sighed, a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and something deeper, an emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel. And as Angel yawned again and curled closer, he knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter. One filled with laughter, unexpected challenges, and the sweet, chaotic love that would define their life together. The apartment was quiet, or at least it should have been. The city outside slumbered under a blanket of night, streetlights flickering faintly against the darkened windows. Inside, the bedroom, which had been the site of the previous night's chaos, now seemed deceptively calm. Angel lay on the bed, half sitting, half reclining, her pregnancy making the position slightly uncomfortable. Her eyes gleamed with mischief even as she yawned lazily, and Cairo, standing nearby, was already tense, knowing that this calm was a fragile illusion. He had thought the evening's chaos, the movie incident and the first round of cravings, was exhausting. That had been only the beginning. Angel, as he now fully understood, was unpredictable, dramatic, and relentless. Her energy, especially at night, could not be contained by logic, authority, or intimidation. Even he, the feared mafia boss, was powerless against it. 3:30 in the morning, Angel said suddenly, her voice light but commanding. Perfect time for a snack. Cairo blinked. A snack. His voice was calm but strained. He had already endured midnight errands, cooking disasters, and absurd combinations. His body was still stiff from the previous night's exertions. It is very late. Should it not wait until morning? Angel rolled her eyes, her hand gesturing toward the kitchen. Late? It is never too late for a craving. Besides, you know the rules. I cannot risk leaving the bedroom. Who knows what could happen? You must serve me. Cairo swallowed hard. His stomach knotted. Serve her. Again. He had followed her demands before, but the sheer unpredictability of this night made him feel like a soldier walking into battle without armor. He nodded, attempting to keep his composure. Of course. What? What do you require? Angel's grin widened, eyes sparkling with the satisfaction of knowing she had complete control. Ice cream, she said simply. But it must be soft, not too cold. And I want chocolate syrup on half, peanut butter on the other half, and a few slices of cheese on top. And a glass of water with lemon. Cairo's lips pressed into a thin line. Ice cream, chocolate syrup, peanut butter, cheese, and lemon water. The combination was bizarre, almost offensive to the senses. And yet, he could not argue. I would fight armies for her, he thought. I will not refuse her whims. He moved quietly through the apartment, every movement deliberate. The kitchen lights reflected off his tense features, though the camera, if one had been observing, would have caught only his silhouette. He prepared the tray with care, measuring chocolate syrup with precision, carefully spreading peanut butter, and placing cheese slices on top in a way that he hoped was aesthetically acceptable. By the time he returned to the bedroom, Angel was sitting upright, her hands resting on her round belly. She smiled when she saw the tray. Finally, she said, a note of mock impatience in her voice. I was beginning to think you had abandoned me. Cairo placed the tray carefully beside her. I did not abandon you, he said, trying to maintain authority even as his exhaustion pressed down on him. I simply prepared according to your specifications. Angel picked up the ice cream, inspecting it critically. Not bad, she said, leaning forward to taste it. She chewed thoughtfully, then tilted her head in mock contemplation. Ham acceptable. But next time, I might want it with extra peanut butter. You must be ready. Cairo's eyes widened slightly. Next time? There will be a next time? He nodded slowly. I will be ready, he said, though he could feel the exhaustion tugging at his limbs. The night continued in this pattern. Angel demanded a second round of snacks, then a warm towel, then her favorite blanket just precisely under her back. Cairo followed every command, moving with the precision of a soldier yet the exhaustion of a man who had been running endlessly without pause. At one point, Angel sat up suddenly, looking toward him with wide eyes. Your tie, she said sharply. It is crooked. Fix it. Now. Cairo froze. My tie. He had been focused entirely on her needs, the tray, and the blanket. Now she demanded attention to his appearance. He adjusted carefully, his fingers fumbling slightly in his fatigue. She watched, smiling faintly as if this small act of control was the ultimate test of his devotion. Minutes later, she let out a small laugh, soft but deliberate. You are learning, she said. Not fast enough, perhaps, but you are learning. Cairo's chest tightened. Learning. For her. He had never been challenged like this before. Not by enemies, not by threats, not by anyone. Angel's moods, whims, and needs had become a battlefield unlike any he had ever known. And yet, standing there, carrying a tray, adjusting ties, and following her every command, he felt an odd satisfaction. I would do anything for her. Always. The night was punctuated with minor crises. A small spill of water on the bed sent Cairo scrambling to clean it up while Angel laughed lightly, teasing him about his clumsiness. She demanded a back rub, then immediately changed her mind, requesting a foot massage instead. Cairo complied with patience, hiding his discomfort behind a veneer of calm professionalism that did not fool anyone, not even her. As the hours passed, Angel leaned back against the pillows, her hand resting lightly on his arm. You see, Cairo, she said softly, This is what love looks like. Not grand gestures or battles won, but small acts, obedience, and endless patience. You will survive this, or I will know you are unworthy. Cairo's lips pressed into a tight line. He could feel the exhaustion pressing down on him, yet he could not resist the warmth in her voice, the soft strength in her presence. I will survive, he said quietly. Because I must. For you. And for our child. Angel smiled faintly, leaning closer, her breath warm against his cheek. Good, she whispered. You are learning. And soon, you will realize that your life will revolve around my whims, my comfort, and our baby. And you will obey willingly. Cairo's chest tightened at the reminder. He had thought he understood what it meant to love her, to protect her. But now he realized that love also meant service, patience, and enduring chaos far greater than anything he had encountered in the world outside. By the time dawn approached, the apartment was quiet, the city stirring outside. Cairo sat on the edge of the bed, utterly exhausted, his body aching, his mind spinning with the events of the night. Angel rested against the pillows, smiling faintly, her eyes soft with satisfaction. The city outside was quiet as Cairo navigated the streets with Angel in the passenger seat, her hand resting lightly on her swollen belly. She leaned back against the seat, eyes half closed, and let out a sigh that conveyed both exhaustion and impatience. The pregnancy had taken its toll on her energy, yet her mood was unpredictable. One moment she was serene, the next she was mischievous, and Cairo had learned that the only way to survive was to anticipate the chaos before it erupted. Are you sure you do not want me to call someone for help? Cairo asked carefully, his eyes on the road. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. He had already arranged everything for the hospital, but her constant insistence on controlling every detail made him tense. Angel's eyes fluttered open, a small smirk playing on her lips. Help? She repeated, her voice teasing. I do not need help from anyone else. You are enough. You will take care of everything, and you will do it perfectly. Cairo swallowed hard. He had faced armed men, threats, and negotiations where the slightest hesitation meant death. And yet, here he was, tense beyond belief, obeying every whim of his pregnant wife. I will do everything necessary, he said quietly. Whatever you need, Angel. She raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a sly smile. Good. By the time they arrived, the hospital was calm, almost serene, which did nothing to ease Cairo's nerves. Angel leaned forward, pressing the call button for the nurses, her expression suddenly sharp and commanding. Cairo followed her lead, tense, ready to respond to any instruction, any sudden demand. The nurse arrived promptly, a kind woman with a gentle smile. She began to guide Angel to the delivery room, explaining the procedures in a calm voice. Cairo listened carefully, nodding, trying to absorb every detail. He had never imagined that the birth of a child could require such coordination, such precision, and yet, it was nothing compared to the unpredictability he faced with Angel herself. When it came time to help adjust Angel's position on the bed, Cairo found himself trembling slightly. The nurse instructed him to hold her carefully, to support her back, and to pay attention to her comfort. He nodded, trying to mask the tension that was threatening to overtake him. Just a little to the left, the nurse said, guiding his hands. Cairo, ever aware of his appearance and reputation, tried to respond with what he thought was a confident, composed smile. His attempt at charm came out awkwardly, and Angel immediately noticed. Cairo, she said sharply, her voice low and warning. Do not smile at her. Focus. He froze. The muscles in his jaw tensed, his mind racing. I am a mafia boss. I control everything. And yet, I cannot smile at a nurse without being threatened. He tried to straighten, to regain composure, but his body betrayed him slightly with a nervous twitch. Angel's eyes narrowed. Cairo, she repeated, louder this time. If you smile at her again, I swear, I will. Before she could finish, she grabbed the nearest object, a small hospital pillow, and lifted it threateningly. Cairo's eyes widened, and he instinctively stepped back, almost stumbling over the edge of the bed. I'm just trying to help, he stammered, his voice low and strained. You are flirting, Angel said bluntly, her eyes sparkling with anger and amusement. Stop it now, or face consequences. The nurse, oblivious to the tension, continued giving instructions about monitoring contractions and vital signs. Cairo's hands shook slightly as he adjusted Angel's position again, trying desperately to focus entirely on her comfort. He could feel her gaze boring into him, a warning and a challenge simultaneously. Minutes passed, and Angel's contractions intensified. Cairo's chest tightened as he witnessed the sheer effort she was putting forth, the tension in her body, the sound of her soft but strained breaths. His mind raced, panic rising in his chest. He could feel his knees weakening. The first contraction hit full force, and Cairo's eyes widened in horror. His face paled, sweat forming along his brow. He had seen Angel struggle before, but this was different. He stumbled back slightly, his chest heaving. Angel noticed immediately. "Cairo!" she shouted, reaching out with one hand and gripping his arm. "Do not faint. If you pass out now, I will hit you with this pillow." Cairo swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. I am fine," he said, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Just helping." Another contraction hit, and Cairo's composure shattered completely. He felt his stomach lurch, and before he could react, he vomited onto the floor. Angel gasped, her eyes widening, and then she laughed sharply, half in exasperation, half in disbelief. "Cairo!" she yelled, shaking her head. "This is childbirth. Not your Mafia negotiations. You cannot be falling apart like this." He tried to apologize, his face pale and sweat dripping from his temple. I cannot control it," he admitted, voice shaking. I am overwhelmed." Angel's laughter softened slightly, though she still looked frustrated. She leaned back against the pillows, her hand brushing against his arm. "You are hopeless," she said, smiling faintly. "Completely hopeless. But I suppose that is why I love you." Cairo closed his eyes briefly, trying to steady his breathing. His body trembled, his exhaustion palpable, yet he could not deny the warmth in her words. She was frustrated, commanding, dramatic, and utterly enchanting. As the contractions continued, Angel's mood shifted between irritation, amusement, and tenderness. She guided him with sharp instructions, teasing warnings, and occasional compliments. Cairo obeyed every word, his pride battered but his devotion unwavering. Minutes stretched into hours, the rhythm of labor unfolding in its unpredictable way. Cairo remained at her side, alternating between pale panic, fumbling assistance, and intense focus. He adjusted pillows, fetched ice packs, and whispered words of encouragement, though his voice shook with exhaustion. Angel, ever aware of his state, continued to tease him. "You see, Cairo," she said, voice softening as another contraction passed. "This is your test. You are not just a Mafia boss anymore. You are my servant, my support, and soon, a father. And if you survive this night, you will know exactly what it means to love me completely." Cairo's chest tightened at her words. He looked at her, fully aware of the chaos, the humor, the intensity, and the overwhelming love that defined their relationship. Despite the vomiting, the near fainting, and the awkward flirting, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he would endure anything for her. He nodded slowly, determination in his eyes. "I will survive," he said quietly. "For you. And for our child." The delivery room was bright, sterile, and filled with the low hum of medical equipment. Angel lay on the bed, breathing shallowly as another contraction gripped her, her hand pressing against her rounded belly. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic, and the steady beeping of the monitors added a rhythmic tension to the atmosphere. Cairo stood at her side, his body tense, every muscle on high alert, and his face pale enough to match the sterile walls. He had survived the initial shock of the contractions, the awkward flirting with the nurse, and his minor panic attacks. But now, watching the intensity of Angel's labor, he felt utterly unprepared. His chest tightened with every breath she took, every tiny sound she made. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted her pillow, trying to stay composed, trying to remain the protector he always was. Angel noticed immediately. "Cairo," she said sharply, her eyes narrowing, "stop shaking. You are supposed to help, not make it worse." I am fine," he stammered, though his voice shook with panic. I am helping. I just. Another contraction hit Angel with force. She cried out softly, gripping the sides of the bed, and Cairo's knees buckled slightly. His stomach lurched violently, and before he could stop himself, he vomited onto the floor. Angel's eyes went wide, a mixture of shock and exasperation. Cairo, she shouted. If you vomit again, I will hit you with this. Focus. Cairo scrambled back, his hands outstretched, trying to regain balance. I cannot help it, he exclaimed, pale and trembling. I am overwhelmed. You are hopeless. Angel shouted, half laughing, half yelling. Completely hopeless. And yet, you are mine. Do you understand that? He swallowed hard, his mouth dry. Yes. Angel. I understand. The contractions continued, relentless and unyielding. Cairo moved like a soldier on the battlefield, adjusting blankets, holding her hand, wiping sweat from her brow, and attempting to maintain some shred of composure. Each time he turned his gaze toward the nurse for guidance, he felt the overwhelming need to appear competent. Yet, every small movement reminded him of his utter helplessness. I am trying to assist. Her eyes narrowed further, and she grabbed the pillow again. One more slip, and I swear. A scream of pain from Angel cut through the room as another contraction hit. Cairo's chest constricted, his vision blurred, and he felt the world tilt dangerously. His knees buckled completely, and he collapsed to the floor, fainting from the sheer intensity of the situation. The nurse caught him just in time, supporting him while Angel groaned in frustration. Cairo, wake up. You cannot faint now. If you pass out again, I will finish this myself, and you will regret it. Minutes passed as Cairo sat propped against the wall, pale, sweaty, and trembling, trying to regain his composure. He felt utterly useless, powerless in a way no enemy had ever made him feel. Angel, breathing heavily from her labor, reached out to him with a smirk. You see? She said, her voice teasing despite the strain. Even the mighty Cairo can be reduced to nothing by my labor. Sweat dripped down his temples, his heart raced uncontrollably, yet he could not help but smile faintly at her words. He had survived countless challenges in his life, yet here, he was humbled entirely by the chaos of love, labor, and devotion. Angel's contractions continued, each one more intense than the last. Cairo held her hand tightly, whispering encouragements, though his voice trembled. She winced, laughed, and occasionally swung the pillow in mock threat, keeping him on edge. The nurse, observing quietly, made gentle corrections and guided them both through the process, but it was clear that Angel's mischievous energy had transformed the room into a stage of chaotic comedy. Hours passed, the tension thick in the air. Cairo's exhaustion was nearly total. He had fainted once, vomited twice, and nearly tripped over medical equipment multiple times. Yet he remained by her side, determined to see this through. Angel's sharp, teasing instructions, her playful threats, and the intensity of the labor tested him in ways no battlefield ever could. Finally, as the night gave way to early morning, the contractions began to slow slightly. Angel, breathing heavily, looked at Cairo with a mixture of exhaustion, affection, and triumph. Here, in this small hospital room, he was humbled, tested, and completely devoted. Helpless, exhausted, and yet, utterly in love. The delivery room was electric with tension. Angel lay on the bed, sweat glistening on her brow, breathing sharply as another contraction gripped her. Her hand clutched the hospital sheets, her other hand gripping Cairo's trembling one. He stood beside her, pale and nervous, beads of sweat running down his temples, eyes wide with panic. Cairo had survived countless chaotic nights of cravings, midnight errands, and absurd combinations. He had fainted, vomited, and nearly been stoned by Angel's playful threats more times than he could count. Yet nothing had prepared him for this, the raw, relentless intensity of childbirth. Another one. The nurse instructed calmly. Push. Angel. Deep breaths. You are doing perfectly. Cairo's eyes widened as he felt Angel's grip tighten painfully on his hand. He had been instructed to assist, to comfort, to hold her steady. But the sight of her pain, the sound of her cries, and the reality of the labor itself overwhelmed him completely. Another contraction hit. Cairo's hands tightened around hers, knuckles white. His heart raced uncontrollably. His vision blurred as the intensity of the moment overwhelmed him. The nurse, trying to maintain composure, guided him softly. Breathe. Stay calm. Support her. You can do this. Cairo remained at her side, pale, trembling, vomiting occasionally, and struggling to stay upright. Angel's playful threats and sharp instructions kept him in a constant state of panic. Yet despite his helplessness, he never left her side, never faltered in his devotion. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the cries of a newborn cut through the tension. The room's atmosphere shifted instantly, electric anxiety giving way to the overwhelming joy of life. Angel, exhausted, looked down at the tiny being in her arms, smiling faintly despite her own fatigue. Cairo blinked rapidly, tears welling in his eyes. His body slumped in relief. He stumbled toward the bed, gripping the edge for support. It is real, he whispered, voice trembling. Our child. It exists. Angel laughed softly, reaching out to tug at his sleeve. You are finally seeing the reward of your devotion, Cairo. And do not faint now. You will need to survive the first smile, the first cry, and everything that comes after. Cairo sank onto the floor next to the bed, his face pale but relaxed, a long, trembling sigh escaping him. I survived, he muttered. I survived everything. For you. For us. Angel leaned over, brushing a strand of sweat-damp hair from his face. And you did, she said softly. You are hopeless, exhausted, ridiculous. And yet completely mine. You are perfect in your imperfection. Cairo finally allowed himself to smile, a faint, shaky smile that conveyed relief, love, and a strange sense of triumph. He glanced down at the newborn in Angel's arms and then back at her, feeling the weight of the chaos, the panic, the humor, and the overwhelming love that had defined these past months. You are beautiful, he whispered, his voice raw. All of this. You, this moment. I cannot believe it. Angel chuckled softly, her hand resting on his shoulder. Believe it, Cairo. This is our life now. You serve two people, me and our child. And you will obey willingly. He let out a long breath, leaning back slightly, feeling the tension drain from his body. He was pale, exhausted, and trembling, but for the first time in his life, he felt completely fulfilled. He had survived the chaos of pregnancy, cravings, midnight madness, and labor. He had endured every test, every playful threat, every absurd task. And now, looking at Angel and their newborn, he knew that nothing outside this room, the power, the fear, the reputation, mattered in comparison. Angel smiled faintly, brushing her hair back, holding their child carefully. Welcome to Parenthood, Cairo, she said softly. You are officially mine. And theirs. And if you survive tomorrow, you might just become the servant I always knew you could be. Cairo chuckled weakly, exhaustion making his body tremble. I will survive, he whispered again. For you. For them. Always. And in that quiet, chaotic hospital room, filled with exhaustion, laughter, tears, and love, the world finally felt complete. Cairo had endured the impossible, Angel had triumphed, and a new life had begun, one that would forever change their chaotic, hilarious, and deeply romantic existence. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you'll always be the first to catch my new stories.